Hello, so for today's vlog, I'll be going over chapter 2. Apologies if I keep glancing over again. For some reason, my laptop isn't recording video, so I have my notes separately than the camera. But I jot down some notes based off of chapter 2, and so starting with impression management in networked settings. So what this chapter kind of discussed was managing personal identity online is difficult because social media collapses different audiences together, making it easy for information to be taken out of context. And it affects how you perceive someone or someone perceives you. And so the passage kind of emphasized that teenagers face a unique type of challenge when it comes to balancing their aspects of identity while also navigating an online persona and being constantly visible online and judged. Um, and I agree with this to an extent. I disagree with the idea that people should manage different identities in different contexts because, to an extent, it's very natural to perceive ourselves differently with different groups of people, even if this is an online setting. We perceive an individual and we come forth differently when we present ourselves to family versus a school teacher or versus your professor versus your partner. Um, and so in different contexts, it's very natural to act a different way. And having a single unified way that we behave with everybody just wouldn't be appropriate. And so I kind of disagree with that idea that managing one sort of identity. Though I don't think that the passage is really getting at that, but I just wanted to say that it's very natural for us to come across different ways and be perceived different ways. And I think that's in fact kind of healthy. Again, because we're not going to say something to our professor that we would say to our spouse or partner versus our family. So, just putting that out there. And what I do agree with is that, especially as social media has progressed, we have a tendency to judge people online based off of the content that they post and how we perceive it. And recently this new phrase and word has been thrown around. It's not very new, but it's been around quite frequently nowadays, and it's the idea of parasocial relationships. And I think that's an amazing way to describe what chapter 2, the impressions of management and networking settings, is trying to talk about. Is that we kind of develop a type of relationship with the people that we see online when we don't really know the person in different contexts or in a different type of depth. And so this parasocial relationship where we see an individual as a certain way, we have to understand that it's not going to come across that way totally when you meet that person or etc. And so, an example of this online would be a celebrity where people say, oh, this celebrity's boyfriend doesn't really love him, or they don't really get along. I don't see any true connection. And it's like, how could we really tell? We're not really there. You know what I mean? And we're going based off of something that we simply see from a 5 minute clip or a few social media posts. And so for teenagers and young adults, that could be extremely difficult. Secondly, for women and rise of raunch culture. Boy, do I have a lot to say about this. So what this passage kind of talked about is that raunch culture has convinced many women that adopting highly sexualized behavior in appearance is a form of empowerment. And the first thing I thought of was the porn industry and how women have thought or have created this notion that being on OnlyFans or controlling the way that they sexualize themselves is empowering and they can make their own money and etc. But at the end of the day, it's feeding into a system that only benefits men. And we're kind of setting women back quite a bit. And of course, there's, I believe, a fine line between controlling what you put forth and just feeding into a society that's already kind of established, that patriarchy. And so, even though it is often reinforced, the same stereotypes feminism originally challenged are, being re-challenged again because this raunchy behavior isn't necessarily empowering. And a lot of times I think of like Muslim women, I think of nuns, I think of Jewish women who cover their hair with wigs, who dress modestly. These are women that follow religions and are very dedicated to what they believe in. And for some reason, that's seen as oppression when in reality, why aren't they being praised for their ideas and their mindset and their mentality rather than what they put forth with their bodies? So, why is one thing being praised and the other one is being demonized? And so, I think that's kind of the idea of sexual images of women becoming normalized. Finally, there's a discussion of pop culture's transgender movement, and I don't have too much to say about this just because I can't really speak on behalf of the LGBTQ plus community, but I will say that this kind of passage talked about platforms like Netflix and Amazon helping to bring more authentic and a multi-dimensional transgender characters to television by telling stories that go beyond stereotypes, which I think is extremely important. And I agree that authentic media representation is important because it helps audience see marginalized groups as kind of these multi-dimensional people with different layers. When you think of an onion, you're not just getting one flavor, you're getting the skin of the onion, you're getting the core of the onion that may be a little bit more bitter than the outer shells. And so, this multi-dimensional idea that transgender individuals are people rather than stereotypes in media, which can encourage greater understanding and empathy when it comes to television shows and media in general. And so I think that's an incredible thing. Again, I can't speak too much on it except the fact that I'm happy that there is more multi-dimension that is being represented. And that makes me very happy to hear because that representation is extremely important. But again, I can't really speak on behalf of what I think because, again, I don't really know too much, nor have I personally seen a lot of media that covers transgender individuals. The first show that I could really think of off the top of my head would be Euphoria. Other than that, that's all I could really think of. And so hopefully moving forward, more representation will be out there. And that's all I have for today. Thank you so much.